Kyle here from All Media Reviews. I wanted to just talk a little bit about something that I've noticed of late. I'm talking about Kevin Gilbert in this series that I'm going to be doing. Hopefully, I don't know when it's going to be done, but of course, my favorite band is Marillion. And something about Marillion has continuously been brought up, mixing with the progressive rock scene. I think I addressed this to some degree when I did the Marillion series back in, let me just get it out here. The elephant in the room that I'm trying to address in this video. My apologies. Where is it? When people talk about Marillion, so I got so many copies, of course. Where is it? They frequently think of this record. Script for a Jester tier. I think I brought this up when I did the series and did my review, and ranking of the Marillion albums. And, there was someone I follow on Rate Your Music did a list recently, just a couple days ago, on his Marillion albums ranked. And he did a write-up and everything. And he talked about how he was talking about Fugazi, and he loved Fugazi. Everyone's got their own take and their own feeling about the different records. But what he did right, when he talked about Fugazi, he ranked it high. He's talking about how he doesn't understand why, I can find my, right here, why it's not liked so much. But, I talked about that too, but the thing I'm bringing up in this video, this kind of point about, is he says, so I really don't get it. I think it's because it's sandwiched between their two most known records. So, the record that followed Fugazi was Misplaced Childhood. That makes sense. That's not really debatable. That's almost basically a fact that Misplaced Childhood is, if not Marillion's most well-known record. But this record, on the other hand, at being their second most well-known record, well, that issue is kind of, I'm starting to question that to an extent. Well, I question that because when I became a fan, I basically came to learn Misplaced Childhood and then Clutching at Straws. And then later, over the years, it's been, some of the Hogarth stuff. Brave, Marbles especially, Afraid of Sunlight to an extent. Even recently, I would say both Fear, Sounds That Can't Be Made to some degree, and An Hour Before It's Dark, all become very recognized, appreciated, known, even while outside of the band themselves. The band themselves that would not be talking about this necessarily. Now, this is, of course, the only record that has the original drummer Mick Pointer. So, you look at the number of ratings. I'm not talking average rating, but rating numbers. How many people have actually rated rated the records, their catalog on Rate Your Music. Now, Rate Your Music, you take it with a grain of salt. The people that on that site seem like their mentality is they basically live in a bubble. They think their perception of different catalogs, different bands, different artists, different songs, different kind of perceptions is not really the general overall perception across the whole music listening base around the globe and throughout history. They're in a bubble. Black Country New Roads' second album, being the 83rd greatest album of all time, is a perfect example of why they're in a bubble. People on that site, they've rated that album's got 38,000 ratings or 40 whatever. It's 50,000 ratings. This is the second most rated album, most ratings on the site. More than Brave, more than Clutch. Misplaced Child is the only one that's higher. You go to rate, I could just go with the actual numbers, and I didn't realize that Script for a Jester's tier is the second most rating. So he's saying it's the most popular. Based on Rate Your Music, he's right. But I'm still really having a hard time with that. Because this has 3,856 ratings. Misplaced Childhood has 5,422, so that obviously is more. But Clutching at Straws only has 3,205. So you have 600 more people that have actually rated Script for a Jester's tier over Clutching at Straws. I'm really surprised by that. Now, part of that, I believe, is, at least some of that is on the site, and then maybe it's to some degree more in the history, ethos, public perception, and progressive rock scene, is the fact it's their debut album. It sounds a lot like Genesis, or the belief and the perception and the stereotype it sounds is they're basically sounding like the Peter Gabriel Genesis. So this is where progressive rock fans go to first when they check out Marillion. So that's why it's become, this is the album they're known for, because, you know, they came out of the gates. And I mean, it is a good album. I like Script for a Jester's Tear, but to me, they did so much better with the, you know, Misplaced Childhood and Clutching at Straws. To me is so it pales. This album pales in comparison to Clutching at Straws to me. You know, I mean, I'm saying this about an album I do love, and when I get to 1983 in a couple, probably later this week or next week, I'll see how high this ends up, because I'm going to tell you it's going to probably end up pretty damn high. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe. And this album was promoted more, it had more singles. Now, I'll give it this. I looked on Spotify. Sugar Mice has like 5 million streams. There's not a song on this album, Script for a Jester's Tear, that has near that many. I think Garden Party's at like 3.5 or 4. So I'm not doing the whole react to. I mean, I did redo that, but not right now. But I also just think it's just weird. It's like these prog people that are checking out or talking about Marillion, they always cite this. And I guess I don't personally think it's fully accurate when they're saying this, like, what's Marillion like? You listen to Script for a Jester's Tear. That's what they sounded like. It's a debut album. What they sounded like when they first started. Yes. And it does sound a fair amount like, beyond even Genesis, Pink Floyd, and, you know, Van der Graaf Generator, a lot of bands from the set. It does, naturally. But to put this album on the same scale, if someone becomes a fan of Marillion, I would say not all, but being amongst their fans, communicating, socializing amongst their fans for, you know, nearly 30 years. Now, this album, to me, is clearly better than Fugazi. Now, some people feel differently about that, and that's been talked about. Although, ironically, on Rate Your Music, Fugazi is also bolded. And actually, you compare Fugazi, all 4 Fish albums have a lot more ratings, total ratings, than any of the other, any of the Hogarth albums. Brave and Marbles are the most rated albums on, I'm talking about average ratings, total ratings from any of the Hogarth records, and they're both bolded, but they're only in the 2000s, whereas Fugazi has almost 3,000, nearly 3,000, and, you know, Clutching's at 32. I mean, and that's not super weird, because Marillion still first and foremost is thought of for Kaylee by the public, sort of like peripheral perception in the music industry for Kaylee and the Fish period, as weird as it is, because now, literally, it was yesterday, the day before, Steve Hogarth's 35th, the anniversary of his joining the band is 35 years ago. So he's been in the band probably almost twice as long as Fish. And in terms of output, of course, it's 4 versus, whatever, 14. So it's hard to really believe that. But they were on EMI. They had the most commercial success with Fish. So that's kind of why. But also, I think it has to do with the fact that prog rock fans always lean and are attached to Fish. Some of them don't want anything to do with Hogarth, or think Hogarth is such a huge step down, or it's very more spotty. It's all about Fish, and then in this case, it's all about the very first album with Fish, their very first album, which sounds so much like their beloved 70s prog and Genesis and Van der Graaf Generator, and that's why. It's like, well, to me, because it had Mick Pointer, while I enjoy his work, I appreciate his work on Grendel. Grendel wasn't even on this. If this had Grendel, I actually think it's almost a travesty. You have the remastered version that has it, but people that talk about Script and they don't include the thought of having Grendel on Script, that to me is a little bit of a shame, because to me Grendel, even though it's very derivative of Supper's Ready in some spots, is my favorite piece they ever wrote, and it has so many fine moments that it's better than anything on here. As much as I do love a lot of the title track, The Web, and Garden Party's fun, I mean, there aren't bad songs on Script for a Jester's Tear, and I like it a fair amount more than the album Fugazi that followed it. It's a perception that I didn't really understand, but I guess it's seen some of this, seen some comments, and seen how frequently this is brought up when they talk about Marillion, talk about even just say great debut albums. It's a good debut album, but there are other. I'd say King's X's debut album's better. There's a lot of debut albums I like more than this, but it's still a good album. I just think now my perception of the way this album is viewed, it's the prog scene, it's the Fish fans, and it's sort of become because it's the Fish period, their album. In some ways, people think this is their best album. They never made anything better, and I don't agree with that, but I guess I'm coming to grips with that reality as much as they're so... Marillion is sacred ground and very personal to me because they are my favorite band, but there are other people's favorite bands too, and everyone gets their own, take. I mean, my favorite Yes album is Relayer. Some people think that's sacrilege, My second favorite Yes album is Drama. I think that's sacrilege. There's also sacrilege that I don't like Awaken very much because of the church organ, and it sounds cheesy to me when people think that's Yes's finest moment. So that's everyone's taste, of course, but I wanted to kind of bring this up and kind of elaborate on maybe what I said a couple years ago, and just to understand, if I see people mentioning Marillion, they just bring up Script for Jester's Tear, you know why? It doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it or feel like it should be. I don't agree with it, but just it should be always brought up, but it's going to happen. It's kind of like, people saying, what is it? People saying the word scenario, or the more really guilty one is the word cringe. People keep on using cringe as an adjective. It's not an adjective. Cringe is not an adjective. It's a verb. Cringy, it's a verb. Cringy's an adjective. So, thank you for watching. What's your take on the whole script thing? I mean, give me your comments. I'm fine if you don't agree with me. If you think I'm full of hogwash, but I don't think I'm alone in that feeling about script, and that that the band shouldn't, especially among the hardcore Marillion fan base, that the band should not just be always thought of and mention this. Even if you're suggesting someone to listen to them for the first time, should you suggest this? Or even Misplaced Childhood. I mean, Misplaced Childhood, I understand that was the one that got me into the band. That's the first one I heard. A lot of people, probably the majority of fans that like Marillion, heard Misplaced Childhood first. But I just think they had so much more, and they should be thought of for so much more beyond this album. As much as it's a good album still. So, anyway, that's my take on that. Thank you for watching. Give it a like, ring the notification bell. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.